Hi, Dan Goodstein here again. I head up media and events at RPA. Today I'm joined with Jeremy Gilliand. Jeremy is the program manager for RPA and sourcing at SWBC. Jeremy, good to see you.
Good to see you too as well, Dan.
So tell us a little bit about, I know you've been doing RPA for a long time, previously with a service provider, now at SWBC. So tell us a little bit about your background.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I kind of came in RPA sideways. I spent about 10 years in the military working with communications and IT technology. So I didn't really have too much exposure to process automation, AI at that point. But when I started servicing the landscape when I got out of the military, I knew that I wanted to do something with technology. And as I kind of scoped out jobs, I had the fortunate pleasure to run into a gentleman by the name of Ganesh Chakalingam. And he's been my mentor over the last 5 years. And he's spent about a good 15 years in the BPO space. And as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of connection between BPO and RPA when people look to partner. Trying to deliver it. So that's where my introduction to RPA began, more sourcing and as an analyst. But I knew as soon as I got involved in it that this was going to be a major disruptor. And so once I got involved, I anchored in and definitely haven't left.
Great, great. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. And so what's different now that based on the things you're doing today versus maybe when you started out with this, or some of the challenges that you experience today versus when you started out?
I think that, good question. I think that some of the differences I've noticed, one from, working at an organization like USA, they're very forward thinking, right? A technology driven enterprise, and they're not afraid to push the boundaries. So when it came to trying to socialize, what we could do with this, USA was really on board, and they understood the kind of value that could be generated. And I think that a little bit of difference when I moved to SWBC and I was actually, a client trying to build this for, my organization, I felt that I was doing a lot of socializing on the benefits and how it could actually impact the organization. I kind of took that for granted at a very tech-driven bank and BFSI organization to, a more traditional organization. So that was sort of one of those things I think that kind of provided a roadmap to me and was different and sort of operating.
Yeah, great. In fact, you actually won an award from USAA on automating the FEMA flood loss submittal process. So how did that come about? And I'm curious, what sort of benefits did they realize as part of that?
No, absolutely. So with this process, we'd actually done 2 RPAs as proof of concepts before this process, and those dealt with some workload distribution and transferring work from onshore to offshore and back and forth. And we also did a letter review process where we were basically reviewing addresses for accuracy before correspondence went out to customers. And we got a lot of publicity for that. So there was an exiting VP who was about to retire. And he was a big supporter of digital transformation. So he came to our group and he said, I've got 13 claims processes I would like you guys to take a look at. And it just so happened it was around the March and April timeframe when we kind of received these. And one of their big priorities was the flood process as a whole. Yeah. And so we decided to take a look at it, and the very first portion just dealt with filing the claims with the government. So if you're familiar with flood claims themselves, they're kind of governed by FEMA. Every organization has to report flood claims through the government, and it's sort of a slower process. And the issue comes with floods, right, is that it's not, annualized, the volume was less than 30 to 50 a month, not even a full-time equivalency of 1, right? But the problem comes when you have what they would call CAT events. So when you have a major event, you're not coming in the morning with only 20 claims. There were days when you might get 100, 1,500, almost 2,000 in a day, depending on situations that might occur. And it was really difficult for USAA to try to, how do you go about managing that workflow, right? And if you have an expected 24-hour SLA that you have to adhere to, then, it becomes very difficult to staff up when you go from one day as 1 FTE of work to the next day 12. And so we took a look at that process, and it was a fairly simple process, but the main benefits of automating it was is the quicker that you submit these claims flood processes, quicker you submit these claims losses, the quicker that assessors can get out to the property and get the damage assessed, right? Which means the quicker the checks get cut, which means the members have a benefit of that speed to service. And so the biggest realization we found was during Memorial Day, there was a flood back in 2015 that kind of impacted Houston and San Antonio and surrounding areas. And I think that morning we came in, and our team comes in at that point, it came in about an hour after operations. And so the operations team came in, they knew we'd built this solution, but there was this massive volume in there, right? So they started to get a little uneasy. But once we got in there, we were able to process the entire batch of the day in less than 12 hours. And they'd never been able to do that before. So that was a huge benefit to them. And it turns out, interesting enough, that when we actually did an audit of the process, there was about less than 2% that were exceptions that got kicked out. And when we reviewed those exceptions, what had happened was the operations team, when they first got in there, got kind of spooked that the volume was so high, and they started doing some manual entries, and it caused exceptions to get kicked out. So a little bit of socializing there, but I'm sure that you can see the benefits of quickly cycling through claims, make sure that the process started quickly.
Yeah, of course. Well, we talk a lot about customer experience. I mean, that's the ultimate, right? That's affecting real people in a tough situation. So walk us through your journey at SWBC. How do you determine which tools, which models, and where did you start? Was there a particular process or a particular area?
Yeah. So how we started, like most organizations, when they start their RPA program, at my level of being the program manager, I was kind of given the processes, right? The senior leaders kind of came up with some areas they knew automation would be a good hitter for. And so when I was brought in, we tried to do a sourcing model as well and tried to find a partner to work with. And it's kind of a funny story because as we did the entire RFP process, rolled out, what we requested and the work we wanted to get done, and we got our proposals back and we got it down to the top two, and we took it to our sponsor. He wasn't happy with the expense and the cost of the program, right? He was like, this seems like quite a bit for what essentially amounts to a proof of concept. So at that moment, knowing I was brought on to, start this program, I kind of saw my role begin to shrink, right? And I was worried. So out of the blue, I said, I can do it, I'll build it. And I remember at that moment, the VP, my boss and my mentor, his jaw dropped. He was like, he knew I had a little bit of background in coding, but no formal training. And I think the only thing he said for the next 10 minutes was, are you sure? And so, I took it to myself, and, I actually had to start the program here from scratch. So I built the first proof of concept. And it worked incredibly well. And again, I was given those processes, but when it comes to sort of the method of delivery, I took some of the experience I'd gained at USAA and how successful the team was that we built there. And after the proof of concept, I used that model essentially to, scale the team and what we were able to deliver. So that's how the actual story began with our organization.
And so how do you judge it, or how does your team judge success now? Are there particular metrics or KPIs that you use?
Oh, great question. I know this comes up quite a bit. So initially, when we started the program, the first goal that we were given, our very first quarter after proof of concept, we had a goal of 17 bots to bring into production. And so I had to not only scale up my team, build a team that I didn't have, build in governance and bake in some checks and balances, but also when it comes to trying to deliver on what the goal was, my personal goal, I thought for my stakeholders was deliver these bots. But that was a misunderstanding on my part. And when it comes to today, how we judge success is with the process owners and the stakeholders that own the processes that I'm trying to automate, right? Because ultimately, it's impacting their work, and their definition of success is going to be what your definition of success is. Now, when it comes to specific KPIs and how we look at success at the automation level, there are a few that I'll touch on. One I like to call return to service, right? So we have a return to service KPI that none of our bots can be out of commission for any more than 12 hours. And so anytime that we have any sort of downtime or any sort of user interface adjustments we have to make on our bots, we practice or bake in our delivery model to ensure that we can meet these KPIs. So we, very often we have what I like to call our defective bot days. And so I have some of our senior programmers, intentionally grab one of the dev bots and they'll get bugs, right? And so then we provide those to our runtime resources. And when they try to operate, obviously they hit snags. And then we quickly go into our return to service cycle. So return to service is a big KPI for us. Another KPI we like to measure is manual accuracy. So anytime there was a manual process in place for this RPA that we built, we like to do consistent quarterly checks on how that bot is performing against a person that would manually, right? We want to make sure that if there's any steps or any changes that they're accounted for in the process. It also keeps your RPA program in line with operations. Sometimes there's situations where the process might change a little bit, or dates or information or data that you use for inputs might change. So it's good to kind of use these manual reviews to allow for an opportunity to re-envision or improve the automations that you build. So those are a few that we use today.
Yeah, and when we were talking before, you had mentioned the importance of bot health. So what does that mean? That's a term I haven't heard a lot of, and my sense is that it plays into some of those KPIs you just mentioned.
No, absolutely. So I think it's a topic that's frequently overlooked at a lot of the events, the conferences that are held. Everybody is telling success stories, which are great to socialize. But for people trying to deliver this, I think it's very important that you take into consideration bot health. So what does that mean? From a technical perspective, the way the traditional applications are built in C# or Visual Basic, it's very linear, right? You have a lot of code that's just in lines, and that's how applications are built. And so what happens generally when you have traditional developers that convert into RPA developers, they like to build bots in the same way. So when you lift the hood of your bot, you'll notice that there's a lot of sequence activities that are just built like this, right? You'll see other things, and you kind of want to destruct that. You want to make it more of a process flow. You don't want your line items that are going through your bots to have to go through all steps in your automation, right? Another thing that we try to take into consideration is actually using the functionality of the tools, right? Most of the tools out there today, you could easily put in hotkeys, right? Control, Enter, Shift, F12, and do these kind of functions. But is that truly the best way for your bot to operate? Is there a built-in activity that's foolproof that will actually ensure that the bot's not going to have issues? And what we found is when you take this approach at trying to increase the bot health and how it works, is that it actually reduces your runtime debt. It seems that you have less maintenance that occurs when you build bots in this manner than you do if you just try a bunch of lines of code and sequences. And so I think that that's one thing that's really important for organizations, is not just to build bots that do the job, but build bots that are healthy, right? Make sure that they're effective and that you're using the full capacity of the tools that you have at your disposal.
One of the questions I get a lot is around scaling, right? So we've done these siloed automations. We've automated these particular processes. And maybe we even have some legacy technology here, but now we want to scale it, or now we want to extend the automation that we've already built and really go enterprise wide. You've done this, I think. Yes. What did you look at in order to do this, and kind of share what worked, what didn't? Any takeaways?
This is probably my favorite question so far. I think that it's really a unique question, and I'm actually working on this, so hopefully more to follow on that. But I'll touch on a few of the topics here. One of the things that you want to do in these scenarios is you have to get your process engineering hat on, right? And you really want to look at the entire value stream. What happens a lot with programs, when they get projects, right? You have a project from over here in this domain and this function. Then you have a project over here in another domain and another function. These two projects, they're completely unrelated, and there's no way that you can scale this effort to that effort. They're in completely different business plans. And so when you stack projects like that and prioritize it, you really run out of opportunities to scale it. And sometimes we put our blinders on, right? We look at only one process. So what we like to do is we like to look 2, 3, 4 processes up and downstream. And that way you can impact your actual automation. So what an example that I like to use here is, let's say that we have the Bank of Dan, right? And the only thing that you guys work in is automobile loans. So maybe you give out 1 million automobile loans a year. And how do financial institutes ensure or they reduce risk on those loans? They require you to get automobile insurance, right? And that's how they kind of ensure they ensure the health of that loan that they've offered. And so in Dan's First Bank of Dan, you know, there's a area you have a team that goes and validates that the people you've loaned money to have insurance, right? We'll say that auto is a yearly policy. So you have a team that goes and checks these policies. So you found out, hey, this is a perfect opportunity for automation. You have one process, your team that looks for this updated insurance information, you're going to automate it. Now, so you've automated this process, and that's great, but you're looking at how you can scale this. Well, we already know that the maintenance of insurance is important to you, right? And you don't have people checking if there's insurance every day because you can't afford the capital, right? You can't afford hundreds of people to check all of these millions of loans every day for insurance. But if you're using a process automation technique, then you have something that can do it at a fraction of the cost. So instead of just looking at those insurance policies on that annual date, now you can subset the group and look at them quarterly. So then you can reduce your risk or exposures that you have for any lapses in insurance. So you're taking one process that only looked at it and you're scaling it to increase the value that entire process does, right, to your business. And you're looking at the entire value stream. So it's very important to one, try to look at processes, multiple steps up, multiple processes above that one you're actually automating, and look at the entire value stream itself, and you should be able to scale that way. Another way that I've been able to leverage scaling is I often ask senior stakeholders when I'm automating just one process for them, I often ask them a question, right? And the question is I know you're doing this process this way today, but if tomorrow I were to give you 100 FTEs, how would you redesign this process? What extra work would you get done? You might have some work that you would never have even thought of, but if you got 20 extra people to throw at it tomorrow, that's going to be a function, right? So if you look at that, you look at the entire value stream and you try to widen the scope of what, your sponsors and your stakeholders use and utilize RPA for, I think you'll be well on your way trying to be able to scale your automation efforts.
Jeremy, let's talk about AI. You're going to be joining our Oasis event coming up and a panel on the AI-enabled enterprise. So what does that mean to you, and what are you guys looking at SWBC around artificial intelligence?
Great question. It means a lot to me, first off. I'm incredibly excited. I'm an AI and RPA guy for life. The next 120 years I'll be working in this, hopefully. But I firmly believe that data itself will be the currency of the next generation for organizations, right? Data is gonna be what distinguishes the true top-notch organizations in the future. And in order to leverage data, you must use AI. It's the only way you can actually gain insights from all of the data that's being generated. Now, from our organization and how we're trying to leverage it, without getting into too much IP, we plan to definitely leverage first from an AI perspective, NLP or natural language processing, right? I think that from just an AI perspective, it's one of the most robust capabilities out there to use. And so trying to leverage that at the point of customer interaction. Not only having chatbots that service your customers when they visit your sites, but also having natural language processing bots support your frontline employees who are interacting with the customers. to reduce work that's handled during the call, reduce systems that those representatives have to move through to try to get information to quickly communicate to the actual customer instead of having them wait. So that's one big way I see us leveraging AI. From another perspective, I definitely think machine learning and doing regression analysis on data is an opportunity for us as well. Given that we provide services on servicing large portfolios of loans for financial institutes, I think it becomes very important in the future for us to do run machine learning against these large portfolios before we onboard them, right? If we're about to onboard 2 million loans, you never know the value that these loans carry. So if we can use our historic data and be able to glean insights from that, maybe we can leverage that insight to do risk analysis or assessment before we onboard future portfolios, right? So I see that those are two ways that we'll be able to potentially leverage AI and machine learning and the entire realm of AI moving forward.
Jeremy, thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you at our Oasis event coming up.
Absolutely, sir. I can't wait for it.